And welcome to this stock analysis for Greatland Gold. Greatland Gold are a exploration and mine development company, a real speculative play. But what's unique about Greatland Gold amongst speculative plays is that they're actually building a mine as we go. They've got their Havieron project where, as you can see here, they're now actually developing the mine. And here you can see the planned extent of the basic mine before they start digging up gold. And they're currently about here in the building of decline. So here you've got a speculative play where there's real tangible evidence that it's really going to happen. Now, what's also good is that their assets are all in Australia. And in this particular area of Australia where their Havieron project is, there's already a lot of gold mining going on. So it's nice and safe from a regulatory standpoint. You know, not like a lot of these exploration companies where they're operating really dodgy places. So that's definitely a plus for this stock. And here you see where the Havieron project is. And they're in and they've actually farmed in 70% of that project with Newcrest, who are Australia's largest gold mining company. And you know, this is when you invest in this stock, it's really all about what's going to go on with this Havieron project. They also have Newcrest farmed in 51% into their Jury joint venture, and that's this Patterson Range East area and the Black Hills area. But the drilling results from that aren't that good from what I can make out. And they also have their own 100% owned Scallywag project. But although there are some interesting silver discoveries there, as far as I can make out, and I'm certainly no kind of geology expert, but from what I can make out, there's nothing to write home about here either. And they have about 5 other licenses, which are currently at the electromagnetic survey stage. But you know, no real positive news flow from any of those. So with this stock, it's all about what's going to happen at this Havieron mine. Now, Newcrest are obviously 70% of the Havieron project, and what's good is that they have this Telfer project here, which is actually one of the largest mines in the world. And when I checked out the Newcrest website, they only have actually a small number of projects. Most of them are in Australia, but there's some in North America and some in Papua New Guinea. But they are mostly in Australia. And this Telfer mine is one of their most important projects. So with that being located close to Havieron, that's really good news in terms of expecting them to come up with the goods. This Havieron mine will help them extend the life of the Telfer mine, and it fits up really nicely with their supply chain, with them being able to transport the gold, ore from Havieron over to Telfer for processing. So now currently there's only 2 more steps to go, which is this definitive feasibility study, which, based on interviews I'd seen, is expected in June of this year, and then a final investment decision and $500 million commitment. So Newcrest will have to come up with $500 million to then commit to getting this project to the commercial stage. Now, I've worked out from some of their development updates that this project offers around 8.7 billion in gold. And then from that, I took away the construction costs and then the fact that Greatland Gold only actually own 30% of that to come up with a 1.6 billion number. Now I've been as conservative as possible with this, and this is obviously a very rough kind of estimation, but I've managed to convince myself that 1.6 billion is a reasonable number, and then we do see a 4-fold upside. So it's not the kind of upside you'd get from many speculative investments, but bearing in mind that they're actually building the goddamn mine, it does seem like quite a reasonable reward. And particularly when you also look at the share price and how it obviously spiked up in 2020 when there was all that loose money, but now it does actually look a lot more reasonable when you consider that they've nearly got the mine built. So looking at the news flow, and it was back in 2018 when they came out with the initial excellent Havieron drill results, and then in 2019 they achieved this 70% farming from Newcrest, and this brought in 65 million to help with development of the mine. And in 2019 they then came out with more drill results which really did show that this was a good mine. Now, when we had the big pump, Greatland Gold did do well to actually raise quite a lot of money over this period at these obscene share prices. And what's interesting is that in 2020, right at the end and right at the peak of this share price action, they announced a joint venture and loan agreement with Newcrest. So one thing is they announced a farming of the Juri projects, but the most important thing is that the whole point of this was to accelerate the Havieron project to the box cut and decline stage. So this promised that the project was going to be funded right up to that point, with Newcrest paying 70% of the costs and Greatland Gold 30% of the costs. And this would require the investment of 65 million by Newcrest. And in order for Greatland Gold to pay for their 30% of the development costs, Newcrest offered them a loan facility of 50 million. However, this was at a fairly exorbitant rate of LIBOR plus 8%. But still, that was the funding and the intention to bring this whole project to commercial production. And it is fascinating that despite them having the best news ever here, the share price then just plummeted from there. And that's just an interesting lesson on how stock prices can just be completely out of whack if everyone's in a buying frenzy. And then it's just always interesting to see them go down even when they've got progressive, amazing news. So they announced the start of the underground decline in 2021. And last year there was even more good news for Greatland Gold. The best was when Wilo Metals invested 70 million in a capital raise, and then also they were able to get 130 million debt facility off some banks. So the great thing about this was it meant that Greatland Gold had the 30% share of the Havieron costs, so that they're now fully funded all the way up to production. And with this new revolving credit facility and term debt facility that they'd managed to raise off some banks, including HSBC, this meant that they now, rather than having to pay Newcrest rip-off rates, they had loan in order to cover them up to commercial production at a more reasonable 4.5% interest rate. And actually, only in the last few months have been some more exploration and development updates. The first was the Juri project, and we have some drill results here. Now, here I've got the actual original Havieron drill results, which I've tabulated. And one thing is, although they did 10 drills, only one of them came up with the golden ticket data. So that says that often you need to do quite a lot of drills before you really strike gold. And so even if they haven't been so successful with the Juri work, it could be that that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't lots of gold there. But as far as this data is concerned, to my untrained eye, it doesn't really look very good compared with using the Havieron drill results as a example. And then as recently as March, we had a development update. And what they've done here is, so here we've got the Havieron mine, And you can see here this crescent is where they've got all these great gold hits with their drilling data. And they've got the northern and western Breccia, which is these areas here. They found not amazing amounts, but reasonable amounts of gold here too. So this update means that once they've obviously developed the mine in order to exploit this crescent here, but then at relatively low cost, it should be cost effective for them to increase what they managed to get out of the ground from exploiting these regions here. So that was a positive little news flow. But really, in terms of the Jury project and also this Scallywag project, which they own 100%, there's not data that I can see that's a clear upside for me for the Jury project. And the Scallywag data, although there was some interesting things there, including silver, when I look at the Scallywag data that I've tabulated, there's nothing there at all that looks like the golden ticket data that we got from the first Havieron drill. So really, those exploration updates, they add nothing so far for why I'd want to invest in this stock. We'll come back to it's all about Havieron. And so it's a great shame that although everything seems to be set in place, Newmont then went in and did a takeover offer for Newcrest. Now, the initial takeover offer was rejected, but then there was a second offer which was rejected. But after that, Newcrest and Newmont have started to sign confidentiality agreements, and they're sitting around the table. And there's this story here now from only a few days ago. But I saw on YouTube an interview where it said that the second largest shareholder was positive about the new offer. And here, actually, in this Financial Times article, we've got the managing director of Newcrest's largest shareholder saying that they thought that the improved bid struck a balance for a reasonable deal and said that he'd back it if it was formally agreed. So the writing really is on the wall, as far as I'm concerned, that this takeover offer is going to be accepted. And then we're back to this problem that if Newcrest get taken over, they might decide to go ahead with the Havieron project, but normally there's a good few months of delay, whereas they have a review of the whole portfolio once the new company's formed. And so this is just so frustrating because we're a very short time period, really, from the definitive feasibility study, and this just couldn't be coming at a worse time. And I really am concerned that even though the recent share price the last couple of weeks seem to be completely ambivalent of this, I really am concerned that once Newcrest get taken over, if they do, then this is going to place uncertainty on this project, and there should be a drop in share price. So, okay, so now to look at the financials, and obviously when I look at the profit and loss, it doesn't look very good, but you'd expect that for an exploration company. There's no real revenue coming in, and obviously only expenses. Now, we have this anomaly in the half-year results for 2023, which was a £9 million of money, which was basically the directors being given loads of investment options with a 12p strike price. Now, I'm always very dubious of option giveaways, and although they're saying that this is a good incentive for the directors to increase the share price, myself, I always think negatively about this, and that's something we do have to take note of. But otherwise, if you take out that anomaly there, we're looking at around 11 million a year burn rate. But then when we look at their assets and liabilities, it's quite a rosy picture. Obviously, they managed these massive capital gains with Wiley Metals, and they've arranged a loan facility with those banks. So we see that they are now flush with cash, mainly thanks to those capital raisers. And so they have around 60 million in cash, which is plenty enough for them to cover their 30% of the costs to bring the mine to the commercial production phase. And we see here that as they've developed the mine, we see the development of the mine has gone in as a long-term asset, because let's say the deal didn't go ahead and they had to then just sell up to someone. That mine that's being built in the ground is obviously an asset because no one else is going to have to spend that money to build the mine. In terms of liabilities, they now are sitting on 43 million of debt, but the asset composition is fairly healthy. It's just pure cash or the mine development. But then when we take away the liabilities and see that they have a net asset value of about 63 million, the market cap and therefore the share price doesn't really look so cheap now when we measure it here against their net assets. And they have a price to book of 6. So this makes them obviously less favourably valued than lots of other commodities like your Rio Tintos and your BHP Billingtons, but they're still actually cheaper than a number of IT stocks and pharma stocks. So I've got my little visualization here, and we see that all the fizz of the 2020 loose money days now does seem to be worked out. And I've zoomed in here where you can just see that of their net assets, most of that is cash. Now, going on to their cash flow statement, and I used their 2022 numbers here, where you see most of their positive cash flows from selling shares, and the costs were loaned to subsidiaries. So they obviously operate as like a holding company, and then that Havieron project acts as a subsidiary which they have to pay loans to in order to do the mine development, they're 30% of. But really, because there's so many different things happening on a year to year basis with capital raisers, the cash flow isn't really very useful in this case. And in terms of their shareholders, I was quite surprised to see that there aren't actually that many large institutionals with big segments of the pie, as I've tended to see with other development companies. The most notable are Wyloo Investments and Vanek Associates, and also Five Diggers. But really, there aren't many big institutionals with large chunks of this company. And in terms of the share, and in terms of their activity, we only see buying in recent years. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that the actual cost of production for this project is in the lowest quartile of all of the Australian gold mines. So that's actually a positive. But really, this stock all comes down to the Havieron project. And given that the writing's on the wall here in terms of the Newcrest takeover, I am really expecting downside whilst we go through a uncertainty period just at the worst moment if Newmont take over Newcrest. And so I plan to wait for that deal to come through. If it doesn't happen, then I think you'll still be able to buy Greatland Gold at a reasonable price. If it does happen, then I think we'll be able to buy them at a much lower price, which I'd like to do. And then I think that, given from what I've seen, it seems highly likely that the new management will actually go ahead with the Havieron project. And I think there's great upside here, but I think it's good to wait out that deal. Also, even if Newmont decide to divest this project, given the stage of development of the project and the value of the gold in the ground, I do think that Greatland Gold will be able to then farm in someone else instead. So I definitely do want to invest at some point but I want to wait for this takeover news flow first to peter out. So that completes my video on Greatland Gold. I hope you found it useful. Please remember that I do these videos just as a hobby for fun, and so speak to your financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Please read the disclaimer and remember that prices can go down as well as up.